I stood there, staring at the ceiling, my body still trembling, but the desire within me hadn't faded. Nathan was beside me, his breathing slowing, his body relaxed with satisfaction. He thought he had given me what I needed. He was content, a lazy, amused smile playing on his lips. I turned to him, letting my fingers trace the contours of his chest, feeling the lingering tension beneath his skin. His smile was lazy, entertained. I leaned in, my lips brushing against his ear. "I think you should text your friends," I whispered. His body tensed for half a second, then the amusement flickered in his eyes. He reached for his phone, tapped a few keys, and sent a message. "Now we just have to wait," he said, his voice low and promising. A shiver ran down my spine. The ice in my glass had long since melted, but I barely noticed. The murmur of conversation floated around me, distant and irrelevant. My body was present, but my mind was still trapped in the memories of the previous night. I hadn't planned to find him. I was looking for something that would truly push me to the edge, something more intense, more real. But the usual scenes, slow and choreographed, only left me restless. My fingers hovered over the screen, dissatisfied. I was about to give up when I saw it, a woman surrounded by 5 men, hands and mouths claiming her, reclaiming her. Before I could think, the video started, and in that instant, I was no longer there. She trembled beneath them, gasping, crumbling as they moved her like she belonged to them, without pause, without mercy, filling her completely, over and over until her body convulsed, barely able to breathe. I had never seen anything like it. I had never felt anything like it. The pleasure hit me with such force that my body shook, my breath caught, and my mind went blank as waves of pleasure crashed over me, one after another, leaving me exhausted. And yet, it wasn't enough. Hours later, my body still remembered. My muscles clenched beneath the bar, the desire still throbbing under my skin. The video had ended, but the sensation lingered. I wanted to know, to feel what she felt. I exhaled, my fingers gripping the glass. And then I saw them. They hadn't noticed me yet, but I saw them, 4 men, relaxed and comfortable, hands in pockets, conversation flowing effortlessly among them. One leaned back in his chair, tattoos peeking from under the sleeves of his shirt. Another had that smile of someone always in control, his dark eyes scanning the room with contained amusement. I shouldn't have been listening, but I couldn't help it. "Most women say they want something wild," one of them murmured. "But when it gets real, they can't handle it." "That's because they don't know what they really want," another replied. "You have to show them." A low laugh, the clink of glasses. The heat pooled deep in my stomach, my fingers tightening around my glass. They weren't talking about me, but it felt like they were. I brought the glass to my lips, taking a slow sip, letting my movements speak for me. One of them noticed me, the tattooed one, Nathan. His gaze slid towards me, then held. I didn't look away. He stood up, stretching languidly as he picked up his glass, his movements casual, unhurried, but his intention clear. He was coming towards me. I didn't look away as he crossed the short distance and settled beside me at the bar, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He took a sip of his drink, then turned his head towards me, as if I were something interesting but not surprising. "You've been listening," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my gaze steady, direct. Maybe his eyes darkened a bit, the amusement still there, but beneath it, something more settled, a challenge. He set his glass down on the bar and turned fully towards me, his fingers drumming lightly on the wood. "And you agree with what you heard?" he asked, his voice low, almost intimate. "Yes," I replied, my voice firm, sure. My gaze held his, unwavering. His smile widened slightly. "That's all I needed to know," he said, finishing the last of his drink with a final gulp and nodding towards the exit. "Lead the way." I didn't hesitate. The elevator ride up to my apartment was silent, but the tension was palpable. I could feel the heat of Nathan's body next to mine, his presence heavy, his movements relaxed but intentional. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. When we reached my apartment, My hands were steady, but my pulse was racing. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, but before I could turn around, he was already there. His hand pressed against the door, closing it behind him, trapping me. His fingers brushed the skin of my neck, and when I turned, his mouth crashed against mine. The kiss was deep, urgent, his lips firm as he pulled me against him, claiming the moment without hesitation. My fingers found his shirt, gripping the fabric, pulling him closer as my back pressed against the wall. His hands roamed my waist, strong and sure, mapping my body with confidence. His touch ignited something within me, something quiet, something raw. He lifted me effortlessly, no resistance from me. My legs wrapped around his waist as he carried me to the bed. When my back hit the mattress, I exhaled, the air rushing out of me, pressing into him, my muscles clenching around his waist as he moved with practiced ease. The tension built too quickly, unbearably so, pushing me higher and higher until, finally, I gave in. The pleasure hit me hard, sharp, shattering as I crumbled against his shoulders, my back arching, my breath catching. And when the sensation finally ebbed, when my breathing slowed, I still felt that emptiness, that hunger. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted but the desire still throbbing within me. Nathan turned to me, his lazy, amused smile playing on his lips. I reached out, letting my fingers trace the contours of his chest, feeling the lingering tension beneath his skin. His smile was lazy, entertained. I leaned in, my lips brushing against his ear. "I think you should text your friends," I whispered. His body tensed for half a second, then the amusement flickered in his eyes. He reached for his phone, tapped a few keys, and sent a message. "Now we just have to wait," he said, his voice low and promising. A shiver ran down my spine. The anticipation was electric, the silence heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the heat of his body next to mine, his presence a tangible weight. When the knock finally came, it sent a jolt through me. Nathan stood up, stretching languidly as he walked to the door. He opened it without hesitation, and they filed in, 3 men, moving through my space as if it already belonged to them. The air grew heavier with each step they took. There was no hesitation, no doubt. They knew why they were here, and so did I. Nathan stood to the side, watching with a lopsided smile, his arms crossed over his chest as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Before the door clicked shut, I felt hands on me, one from behind, large and firm, gripping my waist, pulling me back against a solid body. The heat pressed against my back, the curve of my neck kissed slowly, provocatively. Fingers splayed against my stomach, testing how much control they had over me. I barely had time to process it when another stood in front of me, his gaze dark, hungry, a glint of amusement hidden within it. His fingers lifted my chin, and his mouth claimed mine. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was deep, slow, filled with intention. I felt it everywhere, the heat pooling in my stomach, the shiver running down my spine. Then a third hand descended, tracing down my arm, fingers brushing my wrist before moving lower, pressing against the sensitive skin of my thigh, a touch designed to provoke, to test how quickly I would yield. I was surrounded, claimed, guided. Each one had a role. One controlled my breath, stealing my sighs before they could escape. One kept me anchored, ensuring I couldn't go anywhere. One tested my reactions, his fingers finding every tremble, every gasp, every place that made my body tense with need. They moved together seamlessly, no hesitation, no space for thought, only sensation, and then they shifted positions. The one behind me turned me in his grasp, my back now pressed against the chest of the one who had been in front of me. I barely had time to adjust before the first one tilted my head back, reclaiming my mouth. I melted into it, no control, no desire for it. A strong hand slid up my thigh, lifting it first, then the other, positioning me exactly where they wanted me. The one beneath me settled between my legs, his hands on my waist, guiding my movements, firm, dominant. I gasped, my head falling back, my body arching instinctively. A low growl against my ear. The pressure increased, faster, deeper, relentless. Hands moved without pause, positioning me, my wrists pinned for a moment then released, my hips angled, new sensations replacing the old before I could catch my breath. Each touch, each movement, each shift in control sent waves of pleasure crashing through me. A sound escaped my lips, one I barely recognized, a raw, broken moan. But they didn't stop. I didn't want them to. My body tensed, shuddered, broke completely. My mind went blank, waves of pleasure washing over me, drowning me, leaving me utterly spent. When it was finally over, my body lay trembling, exhausted, completely undone. I barely registered Nathan's voice, his tone laced with amusement. "Was this what you were looking for?" he asked, his breath hot against my ear. I found my breath, but not my strength. My skin still burned, my pulse still erratic. A slow, satisfied smile formed on my lips. "Yes," I murmured, my fingers tracing my own skin, still tingling where they had been. That was exactly it. The room was warm, the air thick with the scent of skin and desire. My body felt sated, my breath calm, the hunger within me finally quieted. Beside me, Nathan smiled, his voice still tinged with satisfaction. "And now what?" He exhaled slowly, a satisfied smile curving my lips. "I suppose we'll have to find out," I replied, my voice soft, content. For the first time, I wasn't looking for anything more. I was completely satisfied, completely at peace. What do you think of this story? How would you handle such a delicate and nuanced situation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Can desire, in its many forms, justify everything, or are there limits that should never be crossed? If you enjoyed this narrative and want to hear more stories like it, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of new content. Share it with someone who might want to reflect on themes of desire, boundaries, and life's complexities. The next chapter is up to you.